Hi, I'm Pat with Ashton Oaks Archery, and today we're in the shop, and behind me we have what, with a little luck and a lot of work, will become a new longbow for my wife Amanda. And we're at a stage right now where I call it dry fitting, where I've got everything in the bow form. All the parts are already made and they're assembled just like it would be ready to be glued up, with everything except for the glue. That way I can check and make sure all the parts fit snugly and there's no air gaps and everything is going to work the way it's intended to. But I thought I'd take advantage of this to do maybe an overview. We'll kind of dissect it and go backwards, since I have to take it apart anyway, to get an idea of what the parts and the process is involved in making a bow. So what we have here, this is the bow form. It's two pieces. As you can see, there's bolt holes here on each of the straps, and so they bolt together, so this becomes a very rigid. So this is a fire hose, an actual fire hose, which is extremely durable, and we've got it capped off on the ends so we can pump air to it and pressurize it. So when this form is bolted together, the fire hose inflates, it expands, and it presses against the bow and acts like a clamping force to keep everything nice and tight while the epoxy cures in the bow oven. All right, so we're going to start by taking the top part of the form off. I already have the bolts out, so we're just going to take the top part of the form off and set it aside. All right, then the fire hose, also set it aside. All right, so then the next part is a pressure strip, and it's just a thin metal strip, and what it does is it helps make sure the clamping force is spread evenly across the whole surface of the bow. Right. So it's just, like I said, it's just a thin metal strip. Set that aside. Now I've got everything shrink wrapped. All the individual parts are shrink wrapped into place. It just makes it easier when you're putting everything on, so nothing moves around. So I'm going to cut that shrink wrap. And we'll take the bow apart. All right, so this is the back of the bow. That's the part that faces the archer. This is the belly of the bow, the part that faces the archer. The back of the bow faces the target. So this, in a laminated bow, you have several layers that glue together to make the bow hold its shape and to make it do what it's supposed to do. So the first layer is a layer of fiberglass. Now it has tape on it. This is to protect it from the epoxy, because this is part you'll actually see. So it's got fiberglass is already pre-impregnated. It's already rigid. It's cut to a specific thickness. In this case, 0.030 inches. Next piece is wood laminate. In this case, it's engineered bamboo. The way this is, it's actually thicker on this end and thinner on this end. So that helps to give the bow a uniform bend. It's already starting to engineer the process. All right, next layer is the riser, all right, which becomes the handle once you shape it and everything. This riser here is a Mexican Bacote. With the black glass, I think this was going to look very good, make a very nice, simple, elegant bow. Or at least that's what the wife has asked for, so that's what I'm hoping, how I hope it turns out. All right. We'll set that aside. Then we have the bottom limbs. Also have their glass, their fiberglass, and their wood laminate, the tapered wood laminate. All right, next on the form, now we're back to full length, because we're on the bottom side, we're under the riser, so these pieces run the full length of the bow. This is a carbon-like strip. It's called stable core. It'll add a color accent stripe that runs through the bow, but more importantly, it adds torsional strength to keep the bow from twisting. With a long bow, you can see where this one will have some curves in it, it'll keep those limbs pull straight back when it bends. All right, next up is another wood laminate. This one is also engineered bamboo, and this one is the same thickness through the whole length of the bow. All All right, and then lastly, we have another sheet of the black fiberglass. All right, again, taped on the backside because this will be the finished outside you'll see. So we're trying to protect it from damage during the building process. All right, so that gives you an idea of the pieces that go into a bow, the process at which it would be laid up. If I was actually laying it up for the glue up, between each layer would be a layer of epoxy. It would all get sandwiched together, put the pressure on it to hold it, and then this whole form goes into a hot box that would heat it for 4 hours at 170 degrees. And then at the end of the 4 hours, we'd let it cool down to room temperature, and then we take the whole piece out of the form, and the bow would maintain this curve, right? And then we would have a bow blank. It's not a bow yet, but a blank that we can make a bow out of. So as I continue on in the process of making this bow, I'll keep making little clips, maybe even compile it into a video. We'll just see how it goes. All right, next step. The bow is out of the oven. It's cured. All the epoxy is completely cured. And we're going to take the form apart, and then we'll see if we can get the bow out, and then we'll have to clean up the bow. So we're going to start by taking the form apart. I'm going to let the air out of the hose. That'll be the first step. All right, take the top off. I'm going to pull these out first so I don't lose them. I put these in to put extra pressure in certain places where there's harder curves, so it glues it down and there's no air gaps. Set this out of the way. Okay, so when I put everything down, I put shrink wrap pretty much at every step to hold everything in place so it doesn't move around and slide around. This can be really aggravating when you're gluing up one. Very first one I did, I think it took me about 3 hours to glue it up because every time I'd go to put something in place, something else would move. And I learned some hard lessons that day. All right, so air hose out of the way. Now we're going to go to the pressure strip. Get it out. Get it out of the way. All right, so when I put the bow in here, I shrink wrapped the form first, put all the parts in, and then shrink wrap everything all as one unit. And that way, none of the epoxy, and you'll see it once we get it out, none of the epoxy comes over and gets on the form or gets on the finished edges of the bow. It just makes the finishing process a lot easier. I've had ones where they've actually glued to the form. I didn't think I was ever going to get them out of the form. There again, hard lessons learned along the way. But I'm going to cut the wrap and try and pull the whole thing off at one time. All right, move the vise a little bit. All right, let's see if we can get the bow out of the form. So there's the bow, blank, and as you can see, it's wrapped in a ton of plastic. So the next step we'll do is clean all the plastic off, and then, I don't know if you can see that, but like that right there is the epoxy that came out from between the laminates, which is what you want. That way, you know, if some's losing out, you know you got enough everywhere else. But then I'll have to take this to the sander to sand all that excess epoxy off and try and get a good flat side on it. And then once I get a good flat side, I can run it through the drum sander, the thickness drum sander, and try and create a blank that is, both sides are parallel and it's the same width, the whole length of it. And that makes it easier to lay out the center line of the bow. And in the end, it makes it for a bow that will, limbs stand a better chance of getting it for the limbs to pull straight back and perform the way it's meant to perform. So I'm going to step over and try and sand this and clean it up. And once I get it cleaned up a little bit, then we'll look at the bow blank again. Okay, so I've got all the epoxy cleaned off, and I've got it clamped, as you can see. I got a clamp here and a clamp on the other end. So it's now clamped to a flattening board. So we're going to take this board and run it through the thickness sander. So this is a conveyor belt, and this is the sandpaper on a drum. And when I run it through, it'll give me this first side right here. Should give it to me nice and flat and straight. And then we'll flip it over and run it through again, and then it'll give me the other side nice and flat and straight and parallel to the other side. So it's the same thickness this way, all the way across. So I'm going to turn the sander on and get started doing that. And we'll put on some hearing protection here because it is pretty doggone loud. And away we go. All right, now it's time to lay out the center line of the bow. I've already got that side done. We're going to do this side. So I've got my combination square set to where it is exactly on the center. I know because I made a mark on this side and flipped it over and made a mark, and the two marks are exactly the same place. So all I have to do now is follow the edge of the bow and draw my line. All right, now we got a center line. So then the next step is I have a template that lays out the taper that's going to be on the bow. As you can see, I've got some holes drilled in it. I can see the center line that I just drew through the holes of this, and I line them up with the center line on the template. I'll clamp everything in place and then just outline, trace the outline of the bow. limb onto the actual bow limb. All right, got that part done. So before we actually cut the taper out of the limbs, I'll put all my overlays on. An overlay is just a thin strip, in this case, of the same material the riser is, Bacote, and this is a linen phenolic strip, which is, I got it sanded so I can put epoxy on it, which is actually this color. So this will go right here on the bow, right on the back of the riser, so that when it's on, you'll be able to see a little bit of the color behind it. I'll also do the same thing right here, and then on the bottom of the handle right there, and then on the tips. Well, actually facing that way on the tips. So now that I've got all my lines laid out, the next step is I'll put all my epoxy, all my overlays on, and then I'll start shaping the limbs. All right, I was just finishing up cutting the string grooves in, and this is just the groove itself. I still have to shape the tips. There's a lot of work to do on that. But the overlays are on. I've sanded them in, front, back, and the tips. I've tapered the limbs. So as you can see, it's starting to vaguely resemble a bow. So we still have to cut the arrow shelf in, shape the handle. Still a lot of shaping to do on the tips, kind of blocky as you can see right now. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to string the bow and make sure it's bending okay, and see what the weight of the bow is, the pound pull. So our bow is strung now, and the first thing I want to do is I weighed it already, so it's coming in at about 25 pounds. By the time I finish sanding it, it should come in about 23 pounds at 28 inches, which is what my wife wants. She wanted a little lighter bow because, like she said to me earlier, neither one of us are getting any younger. We're probably not going to get any stronger. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the tiller, and the tiller refers to how the limbs line up with each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bow square, and I'm going to measure at a fixed point in each direction to see what they measure. Let me get it in the vise and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I've got lines drawn 10 inches out from the center line. So I've got one here, and that's 10 inches out from the center line, which puts us at the point where the riser is no longer in place. So it tapers down to nothing, and we're right at the end of that. So I'm going to measure first this limb, right at the line. And this limb measures from the string to the limb 7 inches. All right, so now I'm going to go to this one and measure it. And this one measures 6 7/8. So with this being the very slightly smaller measurement, that tells me that this limb is slightly stiffer than this limb. So we want to make this our bottom limb. The bottom limb should be the limb that is the strongest of the two, and it needs to be pretty close. That's what they're calling tiller there. So I'm at 1/8 of an inch tiller difference between the top and the bottom. It can vary anywhere from them being exactly even up to maybe 3/8 of an inch. It depends on the bow. And we're going to start right here at 1/8 of an inch. We may change it a little bit as we shoot it just to see how it shoots. But we're at a point now where I can say, okay, this is going to be my bottom limb. This is going to be my top limb. So now I know where to cut the arrow shelf. All right, so that's going to be the next step, is to cut the arrow shelf. So now we're going to cut the arrow shelf out of the bow. I've got it marked out where I want it to go. I'm going to cut it just up to the center line of the bow. So I've already got my blade set, not to the exact height. It should be just a little bit less. And after I make the first cut, I'll keep adjusting the height until I get it where I want it. And then essentially I just start nibbling away until I get the rough shape of the arrow shelf here. And after that, I'll use a sander and a file and whatnot, and I'll finish shaping it with that. I'm sure there's other ways, probably even better ways to do this, but this is the best way I've found to do it with the equipment that I have. So I'm going to turn the saw on. It's probably going to get pretty loud, and we'll start cutting the shelf out. So now as I go on up to that section where it'll taper down, I keep lowering my blade. All right, so we're back with the bow building overview. At this point, I've got the riser shaped to its final shape. You can see I got the arrow shaft cut in. I added a thumb rest right there, got the grip the way I want it. I also have the limb tips shaped to their final shape. So at this point, the only thing that is left is to do the final sanding on this. So I'll go through on the wood portions, I'll sand that probably 80 to get all the tool marks out, and then 120, 220, and 320 to make it nice and smooth. And on the fiberglass, I'll probably start at 150 and then go to 220 and 320 to make it also nice and smooth so we get a good finished product. And after that, it's just check the final tiller and make sure everything's the way it should be, make any small adjustments I need to make on that, and then it's spray on finish. Back in the shop again. So on Amanda's bow, I finished all the sanding, and then I put 2 seal coats of finish on it, and then I let her test shoot it. We shot 20, 30 times, enough to make sure that I didn't need to make any more adjustments for weight, and that the riser hit her hand where she wanted it to hit her hand. So now we're getting close to the last few steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand it very lightly with 320 grit sandpaper. Just to scuff the finish and take any little nibs and burrs that may be in here, because I can feel some, like there's one right there. There's some right there that when I sprayed the finish on might have got in the finish. After I do that, I'll scuff it with Scotch-Brite scuff pad, and then wipe everything down with the denatured alcohol. And after I do that, then I'll write on the bow, because I've already got the seal coats on, I'll write on the bow the pound and the length of the bow. And then it'll go out and get 2 more coats, and that should be the finished coats on it. So I'm going to go ahead and sand this down with the 320. And I'm just, like say, very lightly on the flat spots, just to take nibs off. And I just kind of feel and make sure that I got everything off I want to get off. You're trying not to sand through the finish, you're just trying to make the finish flat. just feeling for nibs now, see if there's anything that I haven't missed, or that I have missed rather. I don't feel anything, so now I'm just going to take the Scotch-Brite pad, and this will scuff, take the gloss off and scuff it up enough that the next coats of finish will stick to it. It's kind of hard to get some of the irregular shapes on the bow with a flat sanding pad, so that's what the Scotch-Brite's good for, is to get down in the nooks and crannies that you can't get with a sanding block. All right, wipe it down with denatured alcohol. I know the bottle says isopropyl alcohol like it's rubbing alcohol, but it's not. I just refill the bottle because it's a really convenient bottle. Pop the top on it. And I'll wipe the whole bow down. Get all the dust off. All right. Now to write on the bow. I'm going to take a little corner of this paper towel here and make sure that my ink is flowing and not blobbing, and maybe I can get this right on the first try and not have to do it again. All right, so what I'm going to write on the bow is 58-inch AMO, which is the length based on the American Archery Manufacturers Organization standards, which is knock to knock and following the contours of the bow. Not bad. And then the bow wound up 26.5 pounds, pulled at 28 inches, so we're going to round that up to 27, and then I'll write 27 at 28 inches, so we know how strong the bow is. All right, now, if I was going to do a for somebody or put my name on there as the maker, now would be the time. I'm not going to do that. I just want to know what pound the bow is, how the length of it is. I know who made it. My wife knows I made it for her. And this way, if something happens that it gets to where she can't pull it, we want to give it to a grandchild or the next person in line, it doesn't have a bunch of writing on it that doesn't apply to them. So this is an India ink, a white India ink pen, and it's one of the few things that will be permanent on here, but I'm going to actually spray finish over it, so I'm going to have to let that dry, and then the next step we'll do is we spray the last 2 coats of finish on. Okay, so we're down to the final step, and that is putting on the arrow plate and the shelf rest on the bow. Now, I've already trimmed these up to size, and I do it from the fuzzy side of Velcro. This is a large heavy-duty patch. You can get it at any hardware store, and it's already adhesive back, so you just cut it to size, peel the back, stick it on the bow. Before we do that, though, I'm going to wipe it down with a little denatured alcohol. Any fingerprints or anything oily that might keep it from sticking real well off. There are other materials that you can use. There's some stuff specially made for it. Sealskin is one. Um, Leather, different types of leather is another one you can buy from some archery suppliers, made for this purpose. Felt is another one that's made for this purpose. But I like the Velcro because you can get it anywhere. And I can replace it and cut it to any size I want and do it anytime I want. So we're going to go with the Velcro. Sometimes getting it to peel off is pretty challenging, though. All right, so now our shelf and arrow plate and shelf rest are all in place, and I'm going to string the bow, and we'll see what a finished product looks like. Okay, so that is the 58-inch longbow, 27 pounds, for my wife Amanda. Mexican Bacote riser, and then it has red linen phenolic and Mexican Bacote accents, and then I have some G10, black G10 over the tips to help protect the tips from the string. All right. So this is I don't know, probably my 30th or 40th bow. I've kind of lost count over the years that I've made. It is it takes me about 6 to 8 hours to make one. This process I strung out over probably 3 weeks. A little bit here, a little bit there, and it's very addicting to make. If you shoot archery, it's very addicting to make a bow that you can actually go out there and shoot, and it does, what a store-bought bow does, and it has your own twist on it. It's like I say, it's very addicting and extremely satisfying to build your own bow. If it's something you want to pursue, I'll put some links on my website of the places where I got all the information, most all the information that I did learn coming up through, and all the supplies and things like that, and give it a try. If not, the other reason I did this overview was to let you realize how many steps and how much the process involves and how much the material it takes to make a bow. So when you go on Amazon and you see a bow that looks similar to this, that's $89 to $129, that's less than I can buy the material for. And that doesn't even begin to include 8 to 10 hours labor. So when I say I like this bow and it's a value in a review, that's what I'm basing it on, is, I'm comparing it to something that I made or something that a professional bowyer has made, versus the material costs, the labor, and everything that you can get it. Sometimes it's really hard to beat those values that are out there. So good luck and straight shooting.